Thanks, Ian. You guys know that your boss is speaking right now, right? It's just a little random to see. So thanks, everybody. It's good to see you. It's good to be in Portland. I lived here for about 6 years. I'm a graduate of Portland State University, so go Vikings, and all that. And I think you're required to say that when you come back. I live in Idaho now, but Define Media Group, as Ian was saying, we work a lot with mainly publishers, I would say. Our portfolio is around publishers. We do audience development, we do search engine optimization, we do some social media, we do digital marketing. A lot of it is education around SEO best practices, around audience development. It's sometimes supporting technical and product teams as well. So we actually, as it turns out, we have access to a tremendous amount of data. And that's kind of the impetus, all right? I mean, that's the name of the presentation, so I should probably have some big data to share. But with the publishers that we have access to, the big data that we encounter on a day-to-day basis, we're able to extract a few things. We're able to look at this and say, what are the trends? What's working? What's not working? What is the industry telling us? What is the misinformation that's out there? And so that was kind of where I wanted to go with the presentation, is to say, what can we do with this information? What can we learn? So I want to start with the industry and then really drill down to some best practices, and maybe not even best practices, but more just what we're seeing that's working. And refining some of that technique that you may have heard about. And the methodology that we have, because I think it's really important to understand, have some transparency into the data that we're sharing. So we have access to a tremendous amount of data. For this, we have about 154 sites that we pull from. For this, I'm going to use about 106 of them across 64 categories, which range from traditional publishing to e-commerce to parenting to games to celebrity news to hard news. So across the New York Times and a lot of the publishers that we have access to, we're going to be sharing today. But with that, we got about 153 billion page views that we can pull from to establish trends, to look at directions, to quantify results. And then of those, we have access to about 12 billion total search visits. So I wanted to go way back in history to see what are these trends that we could pull out. So I went back and gathered data for this presentation from 2012 to 2015, to the end of January 2015. And some of the data is highly actionable. Some of it will dispute some information that we see, and some of it is completely pointless, but it's really interesting to see. So, and I'll highlight which ones are pointless. So the three pillars that I want to talk about: search, social, and direct. If you look at it, of those 12 billion that I talked about, we compiled about 11 billion, and the delta there is a category that we call other, that I pulled out because it's irrelevant data for right now. But what this shows us is that organic search right now in 2014, organic search contributed about 42% of overall traffic. Organic search did. So despite the fact that we continue to hear every other week that SEO is dead, we continue to see this kind of information coming out. We also hear about the end of SEO because social is taking over. We've got data, hard data, that disputes that. That shows that social is growing, and social absolutely is an integral part and should be a part of any good audience development and digital marketing campaign. We see the growth that's actually slowing, though, in comparison to organic search. And then direct. And direct is a little bit of an enigma, and I'm going to break that down and talk about some of the facets of direct, whether it's dark social and dark search, because we've seen some trends that are developing that are a little bit troubling, as it turns out. And those are the three headings that we're going to be talking under. The first one, though, is ComScore. ComScore loves to spew out, I'm going to go ahead and say misinformation. And the reason why I say that is because from the data that they pull, they continuously say that Google is accounting for about 67% of total market share in the search industry, whether that's Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, Ask, and AOL, right? So these engines constitute 100% of the search market. And ComScore will come out monthly and say, oh, Google has lost traffic this month over market share year over year or month to month, whatever that may be. The problem with this is that a lot of our marketing managers are looking at this. They're looking at this for directional, to determine where they're going to allocate their marketing budgets. And if they're seeing numbers like this is where it becomes problematic, because they could then look and say, well, if search is down, maybe the herd is moving somewhere else. So if the herd's moving, our marketing budget, social's growing because I hear all this buzz about social growing and search is declining, we could potentially lose budget. And we've seen that happen. We've seen search budget get pulled at multiple organizations because of misleading numbers like this. So we see 67%. Well, when we do our analysis, we saw a much different number. And looking at 4 billion, almost 5 billion search referrals, we see that 94% is coming from Google of that breakdown. And we see that Yahoo is in there. Other is Ask an AOL. But these numbers are vastly different. And the 4 billion is a little bit different, obviously. ComScore is pulling 18 billion. We're pulling 4 billion, almost 5, which I would consider, and I would argue, is a healthy cross-section of that data set. And we see a much different number. So the problem with that is that ComScore isn't necessarily transparent in where they're getting, how they're collecting their data. If they're getting it from ISPs, if they're getting it from browser add-ons, what they're getting it from, they don't necessarily discuss that. And I troll them all the time about this, and they say, we're willing to talk about it, but they're not willing to talk about it in an open forum. So these are the numbers, unfortunately, that are dictating ad rates, and marketing managers are looking at, but are entirely incorrect. They're off by a generous margin. And so what I wanted to do with this is to validate for everybody in the room, if you're an SEO or if you're just an in-house marketing expert or if you're just here to collect data to take back to the company, that the data that you may hear, that you may see, that is considered to be the de facto definitive, I would say, measurement of search activity isn't necessarily true. Or at least there's another story to be told. So if we're looking at all traffic for the year and breaking it down, search continues to grow. Now I have this chart updated, but I wanted to show this one just because it's a cool graph that basically shows that we see about 43% growth in search traffic year over year. That bottom line, if you can't see, is 2012 to 13, and the green line on top is 14. And this is across that entire data set that we were talking about. So still just setting the landscape, what is the industry doing? But year over year, 2013 being the black line, 2014 being the top line, we continue to see growth. Search is growing year over year. Now, when things happen in October, there's anomalies that happen. There's news cycles that happen that will offset that. And we can say, yeah, maybe search isn't growing as fast as it was in 2013, but it still continues to grow. Insofar that we see organic search growth year over year at about a 35% clip. That's an important data set to take away. That's an important data point to take away. That information shows that with a definitive approach to search and search engine optimization and audience development, in tangent with social, in tangent with the other online activities and marketing activities you have, it still should be an integral part. And we can go so far if you believe the information that SEMPO puts out, which sometimes it's good information. They did a poll that talked about, they went around and talked to marketing execs and says, where is your budget going? And so this is another data point that search engine optimization budgets continue to increase. 48% it was no change, but 20% and 18% is increasing or significantly increasing. So money continues to go into search. I don't know what your personal experiences have been around this, but we continue to see, from our perspective, we continue to see an influx into SEO around budgets and around interest. Now, this is pointless, but I took all that data and I decided, and I said to Matt Daly, who's sitting right here, I said, hey, can you put together a cool pivot table that shows the most searched on day of the week? And he said, why? I said, well, because it's pointless information, but it's interesting. So I want you to guess what the most searched day is for the last 3 years, taking all that data and putting it together to see what the most popular, what day do you think? Saturday, Tuesday, Monday. Absolutely Monday. Absolutely Monday. So I would have thought Saturday too, but Saturday was at the bottom. But Monday and Tuesday because of work. And if it's, and you know, I'd be interested to see if that changes based on the NFL and fantasy football on Mondays and March Madness. If that changed, we have the data. We just didn't want to go through it because, again, it's kind of pointless. But it's interesting, right? Mondays are the most searched days of the year. Tweet the hell out of that because that's a good, it's fun, but it's pointless. Now, the other step is, what's the most searched on month of the year? December. Interesting. December. November. Yeah, I was right there with you. October. And that's from 11 billion of the refers that we were looking at. cold in February. So October. Anybody have any guesses why October? I don't know. It's the news cycle. I think maybe it's because the election cycle that's ramping up in October up into November. I know that's huge for hard news, and news organizations absolutely love elections. Absolutely elections. And then I would think January would be a big one because of the award seasons, but awards we've seen in the data that obviously, and I think it was kind of the pervasive story last week, is that viewership is dropping and interest is dropping in a lot of the award shows, which are big for celebrity news sites. But social and search, there seems to be this battle, and I don't know why. Well, I do know why. It's because of freaking BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed loves to market themselves as like this anti-SEO approach to, finger quotes, journalism. And they love to say that this is the year that Facebook blew past Google, which is patently untrue. And we have a blog post on it, and we disputed this information with facts. They wouldn't necessarily disclose where they got their data from. They said it was from the BuzzFeed network, whatever the hell that means. We told them we have access to that same network because we're working with your publishers as well that you syndicate out to, and we see just the opposite actually. And they've kind of backed off. Not because of us, but because I think they realized if they had taken the 10 minutes to go look at their Google Analytics data, they would have realized, oh shit, Facebook isn't actually the #1 referrer. Because you go out to a third party and see, hey, what does SimilarWeb say that BuzzFeed's doing on the SEO front? Holy crap, they are growing leaps and bounds. And they may not pay attention to SEO, but they're benefiting from SEO. Because why? Because social plays into it. Social plays into search. And we know that to be true because guess what? The fire hose is coming back too. And if you followed the news 2 weeks ago, Google and Twitter finally made up. So I went back into these decks that I had and found this screenshot from 2010. And this is when Google was indexing Twitter in real-time searches. This is coming back. So Twitter is about to be important again. Twitter is about to be important again in a really interesting way. And so we have to start thinking about how do we want to optimize around this data? Do we want to optimize for hashtags? Is authorship going to be important again? Is retweeting, is favorites going to be important? Those are all metrics that absolutely Google's going to be looking at. And so it's interesting that they're worried so much about Facebook when essentially, I think Twitter is going to be a major player. So we went and looked. So I wanted to look at that data and break it down a little bit. Because if you look at what organic's doing, sorry, where is that? There it is, sorry. If you see what organic versus social across publishing networks that use Facebook, that are masters of Facebook. The publishing clients that we work with are masters of Facebook. This is the data that we're continuing to see. Organic search being at the top, social being at the bottom. It's not to say that social isn't growing. It is growing. It's growing at a very fast rate. However, we tried to model this out to see, based on current growth rates, when will social pass search? And it wasn't in 2015 and it wasn't in 2016, based on this growth. So we've got time to breathe. We've got time to think about the Facebook strategy and watch, because Facebook is artificially turning the dial. I'm sure a lot of people saw that happen. I'll show here in a second. A lot of people probably saw what happened with Facebook, but also Facebook doesn't give you a lot of insight into the measurements. So if you've dealt with Facebook and looked at how the data, the tools that they give you around their feeds, it's a little bit nebulous. And so we need to wait to see when they're going to give us tools that we can really measure what's happening and what is the fruits of that labor. Because right now, Facebook is about 78% of a social budget. So all of our clients, 78%, that we looked at about 2.6 billion referrals, 78% is Facebook. Okay, that's a big part of the pie. Why? Well, because they did this right coming out of the summer. And I'm sure a lot of people saw this, is they tweaked something. And they did announce it. They said, hey, we made a little algorithm shift, and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, Gizmodo is the only thing I see in my Facebook feeds because I liked them. And I actually had to go back through and unlike crap because I couldn't see what my friends were doing because it was always in there. And so they did that. And this is that same chart before, but just a line graph. So I wanted to pull that out and kind of normalize. So this is it minus Facebook. So look who appears. We get Twitter outright. Not far behind, but there. And they're about to grow. That's about, if you're looking at what to do in social in 2015, pay attention to Twitter, right? Think about what to do and how to be an influencer, looking at some of those really cool tools out there, like the BuzzSumos of the world and some of the other tools out there. The follower wonk that Moz has, that's a great tool to look at how, and there's so many good discussions about becoming an influencer and optimizing and targeting Twitter. So that would be the focus, the takeaway from this. So I want to normalize for this and take out Twitter and see what appears. Okay, so then we get Pinterest. And then we get Reddit, still out there. And not a lot, but 3 million, 5 million, 7.5 million. And then we get StumbleUpon, who knew? LinkedIn, and then Tumblr. But what you don't see, interestingly, and the takeaway from this is way, 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 way at the bottom is YouTube. And where is YouTube? Well, YouTube is busy sucking because if you think about it, every publisher a year or two ago were saying, what's our YouTube strategy? How do we get our video onto YouTube? And the response is like, okay, look, YouTube is a branding exercise. I mean, think about all those damn annoying pop-ups that you have to close while you're just watching the video. And you get pre-roll, you get post-roll, that's important too, but it's branding. You don't get traffic from YouTube. You just don't. Now, that's not to say there isn't a strategy there. And if you know Phil Nottingham, who's over at Distilled in the UK, he's the master. So the bit.ly URL, YouTube Phil, looks at how do you optimize for YouTube as a strategy, as a marketing strategy, but doesn't cannibalize your video strategy in general. And that's what I would recommend, because you can optimize around YouTube. And if you do, and if something trends and something gets popular enough, it's actually inserted into that 3-pack that's in the web results. So that's not to say we should be obtuse around YouTube. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it doesn't send crap for traffic. And these are major publishers, and they all have video content. And they're all putting video content up there. But it's not our focus. It shouldn't be our focus because there's no returns, because Google has walled that garden off. So be aware of that. Excuse me, this slide, I put it in every presentation, and it's mundane, but it's important because SEO can't be treated as a project. The day that a marketing manager says there's a beginning, middle, and end point is the day that you start failing. SEO doesn't have a beginning and end, and that's the beauty of it. That's why it's never going to die, because Google takes that goalpost and goes like that. They move the goalpost, they secure our jobs for another year because they need somebody to interpret what the hell Google just did. And what are we doing about Panda? Are we future-proofed? Yes, and that's great. So that's where Google and SEO work really well together, is because they keep changing things, they keep adding things. They made a big change yesterday with mobile. Not big, but they said about mobile and how Google is going to be showing mobile results. That information, we'll talk about that in a second, is interesting. But they continue to make these interesting land grabs that make our job important, because then we have to then translate to upper management. So it can never be treated as a project. Never. You can have project managers, and that's important, but never as a finish point. Okay, and that's as preachy, hopefully, as I'll get. But I want to talk about image search, because this still is something that's pervasive, even though the ship has sailed. Google made a change to image search in 2012, and we've got an extensive blog post about this if you want to read more that shows the data. But in 2012, if you remember, this is how you would interact with image search. You would go, you'd find an image, you click through, and boom, you would see your site load. And you'd see this phantom report, or excuse me, this phantom image come up. And we would get the click. And because these publishers that we work with have these vast image databases, and they want to capitalize on these, right? They've got people out in the field taking pictures of wherever they are, or they're known for images, or it's a celebrity site, or it's a hard news site, whatever it may be. We actively worked SEO into images, and we had an image strategy around optimization. And now, fast forward to 2015, this is the experience now, right? We get the carousel, you click through on the handsome man, but you don't get the picture behind. You don't get the click, right? That was a big deal. And so this happened at the end of 2012, eerily, like at 11:59 on December 12th, or excuse me, December 31st, 2012. Boom, traffic absolutely tanks. And this is for publishers across the board. And we were like, what the hell is going on? Something is wrong, and then Google comes out and says this. This is Pierre Farr, who is actually getting a bigger voice at Google. He said, the phantom visit was causing problems for some webmasters, and so we thought we could do away with that. That's gone now. This, along with new options to reach other publisher sites, is a net win for webmasters. And that's a WTF moment if there ever was one. And that's beautiful spin. It's beautiful. So it shows when Pierre is talking, be aware that the people at Google, when they're telling you, all three of them that they let talk to the press, when they're talking, we have to take that into consideration, that this is what they say. This is the approach that they have. This is the spin, because here is the net win for webmasters. And across billions of referrals, 24 million of them that we use just for this to look at. A significant drop, right? Significant. And so we continue to track this. So we refresh this report to see, okay, what does it look like now in 2015? Here's image search. And that's where it launched. There's Hummingbird, oh, it's coming back because they're changing the engine. Nah, they're just doing a tune-up, right? And they just swapped out the engine, but the algorithm's the same, traffic dropped. So as a result, we don't actively pursue image optimization anymore. I think it's important if you have a team, because there are photo edit teams, and for that type of, if you're looking for to increase keyword density or to do captions are important, file names are important, alt text is important. However, we don't prioritize it very high for groups anymore because, again, there's just not a return. In fact, we've gone so far, for contextual relevancy of a page, if you want to add that in and tag those, sure. But is it a higher priority than maybe doing outreach or good headlines and titles? Absolutely not. It can't be anymore because there's just no traffic around it, because Google's effectively hijacking that information and making sure it's a net win for webmasters. So we go into defensive mode, and Pixabay has done something there very interesting. And this is something that we've done at a few publishers as well, is we go into a defensive mode against Google, of all people, right, or of all companies. And that is that they put these watermarks on their site to protect their images. And it actually worked for a little while, and they actually saw an increase. They put these watermarks on it, and traffic went up. But Google started whacking that. They saw watermarked images, and they started pulling them out. And Pixabay's like, crap, so we got to pull this down. So they removed the watermark, and things started growing up again. But they actually update this on their blog. And Pixabay is an image repository that Google's just scraping like crazy. And they're like, wait a second, that's our business model. And so they had to find a way to do it. So we're actually going into defensive mode around images. The problem with that is, and so I would say, yes, you can watermark your images, but be aware that any images that appear in the web results, there's no watermarks. And so they are actively scrubbing, unless you are at images.google.com, which not a lot of people go to. You click through, there's still no traffic. You're not going to your site. There is no overlay, there is no traffic. You get the attribution right there, and that's it. So image traffic, dead, unfortunately, but there is WordPress. There's WordPress plugins that you can put in if you're interested in WP Pick Shield, that can protect some of your images as well, if that's a big asset that you need to protect. So we all of a sudden have all these publishers like, oh, but we have all these images. What do we do about them? Let's put them into slideshows, because publishers love slideshows. They love their slideshows, but nobody can quite figure out how to do it, because you're sitting there going through all these reviews, and it just sucks because you hit the next button, you have to wait for everything to load, and you get all the container, and you just get one picture. And these are, if you look at it, these are factories for thin content, right? These are factories for what Panda is looking to remove, or just the basic day-to-day algorithm, and people aren't going to link to this. So this isn't important. So one thing that we started doing was looking at the view all. So we take all these images, and we put them on the view, we put them in one page. You still have the ability to go click, and view the slideshow, but I would argue that's not a very good user experience when you can view all. So you give the option to view all, and view these as a list, and then you have a little bit more freedom around optimization, because we know that image traffic on its own is dead. So let's find a way to repackage some of this content and put some content on the page, and that allows us to optimize, to do some very specific targeting around popular terms, pictures of iPhones, iPhone timeline, etc. And that allows us to refresh some of this content that was dead before, and a strategy that's dead. And we like to use the rel previous and next tag. Now, when you have rel previous and next, and if you're familiar with that tag, it tells Google there's a series of photos. There's a series of articles. And we want you to take all that link equity and put it back to the first page. So that kind of works. It kind of doesn't. Sometimes rel canonical works. Sometimes it doesn't. It just depends. We haven't seen a lot of consistency in these tags, and so there really isn't an answer to which one to use. And then e-commerce is a totally different beast. But Adam Audette down in Bend has done a really good article around this, and I encourage you to look at it if you want to leverage slideshows. Mobile, and mobile is interesting in that it's popular. I just splashed water all over my face. You didn't see that? Okay, maybe I didn't need to announce it, but I did. So we looked at all the traffic that we had access to, and we said, okay, mobile is important. How important is it? Yeah, okay, it's really important. It's important in the sense that we hear the screaming, but this isn't necessarily misinformation. There's a story that goes that at one of the last meetings in November that Larry Page stood up in front of Google and said, this comes on a fairly reliable source, and he says, if you're not working on mobile, find a new job. And the operations guys are like, what about us? And like, no, we need you to keep the lights on. But if you're not working on mobile, find a new job. Now, he also did say before that, if you're not working on Google+, find a new job. So that's changed. But they're not afraid to change course. But mobile is a big deal, right? And we continue to hear it. But you look at this and you say, well, okay, how important is it? Well, did you see the announcement yesterday? How they're going to be showing that sites that are mobile friendly are going to be actually featured above sites that it doesn't matter on popularity. If your site is mobile friendly, you're going to appear higher in the search results. That article came out yesterday based on news from a couple weeks ago. So mobile is really important. But interestingly, and this again, this is kind of unimportant information, useless information, but I wanted to see what did the iPhone do to this market. So there's the iPhone 5 when it was launched. There's the iPhone 5S and 5C when it was launched. So they have single-handedly changed the market, which is great, but it's scary. And I'll talk about dark mobile in a second, why that's scary. Because they've screwed up a lot of things as a result. But look what it's doing. So then we have to say, okay, so how do we shift SEO strategy because of this? And because of the growth rate. So we took the growth rate for the last 3 years and said, how fast is mobile growing? And in comparison to tablet growth and in comparison to desktop. Because I think it's an important data set, piece of data to understand. So average desktop growth is 5% month to month. It's the old man at the party now. And then we look at the 11% average growth. Now look, there's some things happening in here and doesn't account for seasonality, and this is just looking at forecasting. So it's March, it's next month. But given the fluctuations that you can see year over year, definitely by June. So as an approach for strategy, for SEO, for audience development, if you're not, and I would be shocked if you're not paying attention to mobile, but if you're not reading up on mobile and optimization, and Search Engine Land has a series of documents or a series of articles about optimization around mobile. If you're not, here's a wake-up call. It's coming, and it's about a month or two away before the kids, damn kids, before they're using their mobile devices to search more than they are the desktop. It's not to say the desktop isn't as important, and those two are going to play nicely with each other, but that's just what's happening. And then tablet growth is kind of meandering, just kind of slow. He's kind of the cool kid, doesn't care about what other people think, and just doing its thing down there. But that's important too. But mobile is important, but so is understanding what the metrics are telling us. And we can't have that conversation without discussing dark search, dark social. And what that is it's the misattribution of refer data. So for whatever, I mean, the biggest offender, I guess, would be not provided, where Google is obscuring the data so we can't see what keywords are being used to come to your site, right? So this is also happening in mobile. It just said the battery is running low. Technical difficulties. Plugged in. Is the power strip on? Plug it in. Search Fest. Thank you. No, that's quite right. Okay, so dark Google There's a lot of, and this is going to grow. So dark mobile is a factor. You're going to see dark social as a big, big factor because, again, Facebook is obscuring data somewhat and how it's attributed. But the thing about dark search and mobile is that Apple has screwed up the last two major releases. iOS 6, iOS 7 have absolutely screwed up referrer traffic. And Android is no better. This also includes Android, but Android wasn't as big a player as it is now when we were looking at this in 2013. And so this was iOS 7. And because when somebody was searching on iOS 7, it didn't come across as a search referral, it came across as direct, we were all of a sudden, all this effort that we had done around mobile, we can't quantify anymore. And in 2013, this whole mobile strategy that we had tanked because we couldn't track it. And then, and this was eerie, in July 13th, both Android and Apple switched it on the same day. And boom, they're back. So coincidence? I don't know. It seemed a bit odd that both Android and Apple were not passing refer data, and then they switched it on the same day. Now, I can put my tinfoil hat on, but that's screwed up. And so we continue to see this happening. Now, iOS 8 was good, but it's inconsistent at best. And so the takeaway there is when you see new iOS releases and Android releases, prepare the upper decks for what could happen and making sure that everyone knows and to manage expectations that historically they have not done a very good job of rolling out these releases. And you should check on your own. You get your phone, you load Google Analytics in real time, you load up a search, and you see how it's attributed. And that's the easiest way to do it. That's how we did it, just to make sure that things are happening. Even with 8.1, when it rolled out, that was the first thing that we look at, is to make sure that that data set is correct, because they continue to screw it up. Android has done it, and iOS 8 has done it, or iOS 7 has done it. And then we get this direct number. Now, so we talked about organic, we talked about a social. I'm going to talk about organic here a little bit more in a second. Direct, what's bad about direct? Direct traffic increased in 2013, and it was commensurate with searches decrease at the same year. So direct was increasing, search was decreasing at the same rate in 2013. That's odd. That screams misattribution, problems, dark search, dark social. Something's happening there. Now, direct traffic has tapered off in 2014, and we're running tape on 2015 so far to make sure that what seems to be trending is trending down. But what the takeaway here is to watch what your direct traffic is doing. Look at that bucket to see if it's growing or if it's shrinking from 2013 to 14 to 15. Because if it's growing and search is dropping, that's a telltale sign that something's not tagged correctly. It could be something as simple as GA not tagged on every page, but it could be something bigger. And so we're watching because we don't know. We don't know what's happening. In a short plug from MozCon is that's what my presentation is going to be on in MozCon in July, is all about dark search and dark social, because we'll have enough data at that point maybe to make at least a guess or at least to validate what people are seeing. But Google likes to obscure data. We know that to be true. So that one's a little bit concerning to us. But Google does give good information every now and then. So we've got this small site. We're cruising along just fine until about 2 weeks ago. Boom, 2,404s because they made a template change. And so we were like, that's not a problem. That's not a big deal. What was Google's response? And this is different. So I don't know if anybody else has had this change or has seen this lately, but Google's response to 404s wasn't this significant lately, at least in 2014. We started to see a little bit more activity around this reporting, which tells us something, which is actually good. So Google's response was, okay, they saw that there's an influx. They saw that there was some activity. 404s started appearing, and we saw crawl stats go up. You usually, in my experience, we don't see something EKG like this to tell us something happened. Now, the follow-up with that is time spent downloading a page dropped. So Google's like, nope, if you got 404s like this that spike, now that was approximately 5% of the total site. 2,000 pages was 5% of the total site. If you have that amount of 404s, we're going to spend less time on crawling the site. Now, we didn't lose traffic, but it's coming unless you get a specific window to fix this. Now, this may be no-brainer information, but this is the first time we've seen a response like that. Now, interestingly, we've got a much bigger site. And we're cruising along, blah, 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 and then bam, somebody hit the water main. And we saw 3 million 404s peak in the period of 2 weeks. Like, oh, shit, this was bad. And what was Google's response? Because sometimes they'll treat bigger sites different than smaller sites. Google's response, they bailed. They said, no, we are not going to crawl this content. In fact, we're going to back that up. I mean, we're not going to crawl the content. We're not going to download the content. However, things have started to come back, which I thought was interesting too, because they're kind of saying, okay, we're going to give you a second chance, but time spent downloading hasn't come back. So they're trying. So when you hit 404s, the takeaway here is 404s, Google will come back. And they'll look at your 404s. And if you have a problem, and everybody breaks something, when you're going through a migration or a template change or you're going through a CMS change, something's going to break. You've got a small window. We haven't seen the traffic drop yet from this, but it's coming because we see it right here. The time spent downloading the page, they keep coming back trying to give us a break. Have you fixed the problem? Haven't fixed the problem, and the traffic's going to drop. And so we didn't have enough data to show because it just happened, but traffic's going to drop. What would be interesting to see is if ranking's dropping right now. And we just don't have enough time in the rear view yet to quantify that. Maybe we'll blog about it at some point. But I don't want to spend a lot of time on titles and headlines, but this is still the most influence that you can have over your content. You write good headlines, you write good titles, you go do the keyword research, you read about your target market, you do the research with SEMrush, SEMrush, and Bill Hertz was, I'm sorry, I just massacred his last name, but Hertzer was talking about it this morning about keyword research techniques. There's all different kinds. You absolutely should train editorial teams. You should train them on how to do keyword research, whether it's using Google Trends, whether it's using a bigger keyword utility. If you're buying into it, using free tools, you have to, because we see the results. You can make a small change and have a huge result in a very short period of time, making just a small little change. So don't underestimate the power of the best practices, the blocking and tackling, that is titles and headlines, because that's an important part to this. Going through and doing the research and adjusting. If you publish something and it doesn't work, go back and rework those headlines. If you're in Google News, you absolutely should be paying attention to this on a day-to-day basis, because these kind of headlines have a very big effect overall. So let's talk about secure search, HTTPS. Secure search is the big thing, right? And we've heard about this, and Google's gone so far as to say, oh, HTTPS, if you secure your site, we will use it as a ranking signal. And if you do it, we will see it. We will actually increase ranking as a result of that. No. Nope, nope, no, no. We've had several sites now that straddled the line. Some were secure, some weren't. No change in ranking. We've had sites that were not secure. We've had sites that have been completely secure. We have sites that just went secure a week ago, a huge site that just went secure a week ago. Have not seen anything. So as far as where the roadmap is somebody saying, hey, should we do this? Should we go secure? Should we go through the process of migrating to secure? It's not a ranking signal. So don't use it as an SEO prerogative, because it's not. It's a technical one, and it could be important for your site. It's just not important for search yet. It could be someday. But Google touting this as like a ranking boost, everybody get in line. No, it's Google pushing their agenda. Interesting but pointless data is looking at an 80 million page site that just went secure. And the blue line is impressions, non-secure. The green line is impressions secure. And when we flip the switch, boom, Google picks it up really fast. So they're very responsive to this. So if you're doing it, you can plan on this. You can plan on a responsive Google approach. So when you're trying to look at the data and to say, we want you to calculate out and forecast what the drop is going to be in traffic, what the drop is going to be in impressions, in total impressions, and then eventually, of course, in clicks, it's not going to be as significant as we thought. And this is an 80 million page site, 80 million pages, and Google picked it up quick. Clicks, impressions, they did the changeover fast. Now what will be interesting when we're a couple more weeks out is see what happens to ranking. But again, we've seen big sites that it has no influence on it whatsoever. So be aware of that message, because It's a bit erroneous for now. The biggest of the big data that you can look at is log file analysis. And technically, everybody has access to this data. It's very ugly data. It's not fun to play with because log files are huge, right? They're massive, and they can be, and there's no real easy way to pull through it. But why it's interesting is because we took a big publisher of ours and got about a month's worth of their log file data, and it was an insane amount of data. It was, tens of 20s of 30s of 40s of gigs of data for just 1 month. And we looked at it and we said, how many times did Googlebot request a page on the network? And we got the hard data. This is the hard data that shows us exactly what's happening. And Google came back at 1.3 million daily spider visits. That's a lot, right? And so we went in and was like, okay, Webmaster Tools has that data. Let's go see what Webmaster Tools says at that same time frame. And Google Webmaster Tools says, on average, 12 to 13,000 a day. Pages crawled per day. Those are requested pages, right? So that makes us think, okay, well, what's Webmaster Tools data telling us? And what that's telling us is that Webmaster Tools is one data point. It's an important data point, and it's a good data point for auditing, but is not the gospel. This is the company that won't trust us with our own keyword data. Why are they going to trust us with their crawl data, right? They're not giving us all their links, all the links that they have. They're not giving us ranking data. They're not giving us keyword data. They're not going to give us crawl data. So if you're looking at this and say, hey, crawl data is just fine, well, you kind of don't know. Unless you're looking at your log file data, you don't know. But the log file data will tell you exactly. So if you are interested in doing this, you can go learn about this tool. It's a tool called Splunk, S-P-L-U-N-K. And it will be your best friend. Now, there is a learning curve with this, but I was able to tackle it in 3 hours, and that's saying something because you stick it up there, you tell it where the log file is, and then I just typed in Googlebot. And it showed us some very interesting things. And so if you have Friday afternoons, and if you're looking for something to do, go load up Splunk, or I'll show you some other tools here at the end that will show you, and go ask your IT or your ops guy, say, I need a month's worth of data. The more you can get, the better. However, the more you use, the more you need Splunk. Some of these tools will work with smaller data sets, but if it's a big one, you have to use Splunk. But this is what it will tell you. It'll start showing you where Google is going on the site, and that's valuable data, okay? And it's valuable on a number of different levels. First off, it'll tell you what pages it's requesting, okay? Now, I want to be clear. The pages that it's hitting, the pages that it's accessing, the pages that Googlebot is requesting, we looked this up, does not correlate with popularity or ranking. So there's this, all of a sudden, there's this third data point. We've got ranking, we've got backlinks and popularity. Now we've got crawl requests. That's this unsung hero that will really tell you what's happening on the site. That's the third data point that is hard to extract, but it's very telling because it's going to show you the popularity of your site, the true popularity based on the requests. So we saw this happening over and over and over again, up to the thousands. Why did it keep requesting these pages on our site over and over and over again? Because we were able to look at information architecture. That's what it backs us up to, is how is PageRank cascading through a site? And we all want to know this. And so we started looking at what pages were important, what sections were important to Google. And we found that search pages were important. We found that section pages, city page, home page, international pages. And this was interesting. Now, search pages make sense because it's a list of links, right? And so that's basically a jumping off point. That's an easy page for Google to access a lot of the site. But if we want to know how to cascade PageRank, and we all should want to know, what are we doing with that link equity from the home page, and how is it distributed throughout the site, and how is Google attributing popularity and that PageRank algorithm to your site? Well, this is it, because what Splunk will tell you is popularity, and we were able to look at the most popular the most popular sections on the site. So if you want to know how to cascade PageRank through your site, you look right at those section fronts and determine which ones, are the most popular. We found business, sports, movies, and style for this particular publisher of ours. And we thought business, that's interesting because you go back and look, and business covers everything. They cover movies, they cover sports, they cover restaurants, they cover politics, everything. So it was very clear that Google can access the entire site from the business section, but they can also tell us the most crawled pages on our site. Now, when we're launching something new, and if we have a new initiative, or if we're refreshing, or if we've got this new package of slideshows that we're going to push, or the New York Times did when it was the 150th anniversary of the Civil War, we can put it on the homepage, but you better believe we're going to put something on the business page too, if this were the New York Times. Now, there are tools. There's other tools. There's Weblog Expert. There's Exact Trend. They're a little bit easier to work with because they're smaller and they can handle smaller data sets. But if it's big, these are going to choke and you're going to need Splunk. But these can help you navigate through. If you want a primer about how to do this, go read David Sotomano's article. He did this article 2 years ago for Moz, and it's outstanding. It's how I learned about Splunk and how I went in and started this project. And it's just that bit.ly it's Moz log files, and that's a very good, easy to understand starting point for log file analysis on your Friday afternoons. I appreciate your time, and live long and prosper seemed appropriate today, and I appreciate it, and thank you for coming, and I appreciate you attending the session. I'll turn it over to Ian.
So that was awesome. I actually think, given where we're at time-wise, it might make sense, because I have a bunch of questions for you. So it might make sense to just put you on the spot here and get at the same questions I was going to talk about anyway. But this way I can make you completely uncomfortable and squirm because you have no idea that I was going to do this.
Yeah.
So,
you want to pull up your slides?
First of all, can you share the Splunk recipes that you used to do that?
Well, I mean, all we did was just search for Googlebot user agent, which it's actually on that slide. It shows the recipe is I just went, and Splunk does a lot of work, so there it is right there. You can't quite see it, but it's like Googlebot 0.1, something like that. But you just search for it and you find it. And you type in their user agent into that Splunk search field, and it pulls back everything.
And you didn't have to do any pre-processing of the log file, you just put it right in there?
It was the raw data file. And it's huge. It's a raw data dump, and you just point Splunk at it, and it turns your computer, because it does it locally. So you have to have the horsepower, or you can upload it somewhere and Splunk will go find it. But you got to have the horsepower to do it. And it just turns your machine into this parser, and it goes through and segments all that data for you.
So that was going to be my other question. Are you using Splunk Desktop or Splunk Cloud?
I use Splunk Desktop because I didn't know any other, honestly.
It only costs about $1 kajillion,
right.
too.
And so you use the free version, too, by the way.
Okay.
I use the free version, and it'll only do so much. I think it'll only give you so much power. But I got a month's worth of data, which told me everything I needed to know. And if they get bigger than that, you're going to run into problems because of just what the tool can do and what your machine can handle, ultimately. But it's a hardy tool, and it's fun. And there's a huge open source community around it that supports this, too. And there's a bunch of nerds that really know how to work this. And they use it for everything. It's not just for data or log file analysis. They use it as an independent parser. They use it for search. They use it for all kinds of things. So in the development community, it's a well-known tool. And so they look, it's not like this is some newfound gem. It's just us kind of moving into their world.
Yeah. So a couple other questions, and then I'll zip through this. But how do you pry the log files out of the greedy little fingers of your IT?
That was hard.
Okay.
It took months because it's not easy. And a lot of times they have to go to tape backup to get it. And so make the request early. And make the request and be patient. And tell them that you want, and they'll say, how much do you want? And you say, as much as you can give me. And they won't like that answer. Because just tell them, start with, they'll roll your eyes at you if you say a year, and it will be too big. I would say start with a month. But the point of this is the more you can get, the better, because then you can start establishing trends. Because one thing that doesn't account for is seasonality. It doesn't account for activity around news cycles, around what's happening in publishing at that point in time, but we just couldn't do any more than that. And so at About.com, I got them integrated, I got them to produce these reports to me. If you let them do it for you, which if you're friendly with the IT person, they can do it for you. They'll produce it. I got them producing like once a quarter, and that's a beautiful thing. But ask early and don't ask for a year.
So one last one. What did you use to crunch the other data, the billions of page views and things like that?
We have a proprietary tool set that was able to extract, and I'm pretty proud of this one. We worked hard to get Omniture and GA to talk, and we got it to work. And so we have a proprietary tool set that runs this data on a daily basis, and we've got it categorized where we can see what's happening in the industry on a I think it's a 2-day latency period, but it's really cool because it allows me to put together a presentation like this with just one tool other than Splunk. So, but it's useful, and we talk about this data on our blog a lot. So we're sharing this data. We anonymize our clients, of course, but we talk about the industry. And so if you go to definemg.com and the blog, we don't blog excessively. We blog when there's a message. We blog when Apple decides to screw things up, or image search dies, or there's a lot of other reasons why. So we have a very high signal to low noise ratio if you're looking for that data.
Yeah, that's pretty cool too. I'm going to go really fast here. I just want to tell you about another tool that you can use to do this. Main thing to know here is you can do this thing called machine learning to crunch through all this data. Speaking as a history major, it's not as easy as it sounds. But there is a tool out there that makes it a lot easier. I have no commercial relationship with this company. Okay, I have no reason to promote them. But we had this massive pile of links, and actually this is what I used to do my talk this morning. And we took in about 250,000 domains, which was about 4.5 million links, and needed to process them. And Excel doesn't really like that. So you couldn't really use Microsoft Excel to do this. You could do some text file stuff, right, which is really fun. You can use a tool called SQLite, which is basically a database program. Good luck with that. Or you can take all this data and upload it to a tool called BigML. And this is sort of the machine learning equivalent of Splunk, in that it makes it very easy to do some basic machine learning. You need to understand some basic principles. You upload a data source, and you turn that into a data set. All that means is it takes this big comma delimited file or tab delimited, whatever, and turns it into a set of fields, and you can predefine what you want those fields to be. And then it'll turn that into a model. And this is the crucial thing. So what it's doing is it's looking for, it'll take one field in your data set, which it calls an objective field. So let's say you have a whole bunch of links, and those links are good or bad, all right? And that field, that column in your spreadsheet would be called type or status, whatever. Your objective field would have a value of good or bad. What it'll do is it'll go through your entire data set and use the model to identify the factors most often seen in something that is good and something that is bad. So you understand what that's doing? It's letting you identify factors and signals for different things in a massive data set. So if I have 4.5 million links, and I have basic data, columns of data on each one. I have the PageRank, the trust flow, citation flow, number of inbound links. It'll take all of that and say, okay, when there are this many inbound links, it is more likely to be a spammy page. And it develops this cool model, and you look at that and you think, ooh, that's science. And then it lets you go in and tweak this, all right? It lets you go into this model and tweak the model. So you can say, all right, right now it is 99.3% sure of links that are bad. And here are the conditions. Now, if I change the conditions, if I change the ratio of domains to backlinks, which is just a number I put in there, so it could be any number, if I change that to 0.1, what happens? In this case, it became only 75% sure that it was a true. So it let me really tune and figure out what these numbers were. And then the other thing that I'll just say very quickly is that crap data really means crappy results. So you have to be very careful with this. There's a good guide up on that site. Make sure you read it or talk to another nerd about it. Understand that these are not causational things. They're not showing you what causes something. They're showing you correlations. They're showing you things that appear to happen when something else happens. And that's all I got. So I'll let you ask Marshall some questions now.
My head just exploded.
So any
Questions?
See, is that working now? Okay. Thanks, Marshall. That was really awesome. I really liked the part about the dark search. And I was wondering if you knew, like, one of the new things that came in the new versions of iOS is like a top hits section that shows when you start typing in searches or web addresses. That's not search traffic, right? That's
not,
direct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So those, it's early, but there's a lot of conversation around those, interestingly, in some of the circles that we run in. Because, again, those predefined searches, they're not passing any kind of referrer data. And so when you select those, and you don't see them a lot, but I suspect you'll see them more, but when you're in your phone and you see like these hard-coded recent searches or something to that effect, they're not passing referrer data. Now, is that... Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting side to this, too, because I suspect that's only going to increase. So we need to prepare upper management that mobile may not be able to track mobile as closely as we want to, and we're putting all this effort against it, and it's overtaking desktop. We need to be communicating that quickly, that GA is not going to tell us everything, Omniture is not going to tell us everything we need to know about it, so they understand. Because you're going to put a lot of resources and time against it, especially if you're going responsive or if you're trying to maintain MDOTs somewhere. So.
When we were talking about HTTPS and you said like definitely not so far that you can tell a factor, it kind of made me think, when has Google told us that a factor will be a factor?
Right. Yeah.
Versus when has Google told us that it won't be a factor and then it is a factor? I mean, have they ever actually told us that something
Amen,
is a
brother.
factor and it pans out?
Amen. I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm sure if we went back, yeah. So no follow tags. Remember, I was reading. Yeah. Well, and they told us. Remember, Kat said that, yeah, it's okay if you use no follow to PageRank sculpt back in the day, and then they pulled that back, right? So look, they have an agenda, but again, I'm here because of the work that they do, and they keep moving. I'm thankful to what blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is, yeah, they're not going to tell us the truth. I mean, we see that. Even the data they give us isn't the whole story. It's never the whole story. That's why we should treat Webmaster Tools as one data point in a lot. There's a lot of third-party tools that you can use to get the real data. And I think that would be a very interesting keynote for next year, how to get around Google Webmaster Tools, like alternates to Webmaster Tools. And because I think the story is very clear that it's not entirely the real story. This is my neighbor, by the way, that's about to ask a question. He lives like
Loaded
a block
question.
and a half
Staged.
away from me from Boise. And apparently he feels like he needs to do this. So.
I said I was going to heckle you.
Go ahead, sir.
So with the increased focus on Twitter and the starting to actually have a relationship with Google again, are there any specific optimization methods that you can see possibly being different this time around versus last time? And what would those be?
Well, I like the idea, and again, this is completely half-baked, but optimizing around hashtags. Hashtags are useless, right? All they are is fodder for Jimmy Fallon, which is really funny, right? But what are we going to do with it? But Google used them last time. They looked at them for things that were trending. They looked at them for search, and I shouldn't say they're useless because you can search on them. But I think that that's important. But I also think that authorship, because just because Google has pulled the little icon, doesn't mean that authorship is dead. Now the authorship tags are dead, but you better believe that if I'm writing an article and David Pogue or Kara Swisher or some notable person from The Verge is writing, they know and they have authorship ranking established with a person. And that's going to happen with Twitter too. So that's why I was mentioning the whole thing about influencers, is using follower wonk and using some of the big tools out there to find out who can you do outreach. And because that's what social is, right? It's just the next phase of PR. So who are you reaching out to syndicate and to push your content to? to make aware of your new story, your blog post, your change of site, your initiative that you have. These influencers will help because Google's going to pay attention to those signals. They're going to pay attention to things that are favorited. They're going to absolutely pay attention to retweets. And so they'll be able to look through and say, oh, it's a spam bot. We know that. But we also see that Walt Mossberg just pimped this guy's site, a review that he did. That's going to have a lot of street cred. So it's about looking, so we're going to have to go back. It's a new kind of keyword research. It's to identify who's an influencer in a particular category.
So just, sorry, quick question. Do you think authorship tags are dead, or did they just take away the thumbnail? Because this is another one of those places where you wonder,
Interesting.
Is Google saying something's not a
No,
signal?
it's a fair point. Now, we've deprioritized it. We don't necessarily include that because it's a low priority as far as like SEO recommendations. It's certainly not dead. The concept is not dead because, again, Google, that's why they started Google+, right? Because they were fighting with Twitter and they needed the social data. Because backlinks, guess what? They've been hacked, right? You can spam your way to the top still with Google and backlinks if you do it right. But, so they need social influences. They had it with Google Reader, which doesn't make any sense why they shut that one down, because that was a definitive guide to what people were doing and how they were interacting with content and what was popular. That made no sense still. However, they're back, and they're friendly with Twitter again, so this gets interesting, but authorship is not dead. It's certainly not dead because, again, they have to establish, they have to keep getting micro and looking at, sure, we know the New York Times is the definitive resource for hard news and information, but who of those people are they topically relevant to? So it just makes sense. Should we deprioritize the tags completely? I don't know. It just depends on how fast your technical teams can implement them.
So Marshall, if I read your slide right, you looked at your visits in the weblog and saw 1.3 million, and then you went to Webmaster Tools and saw 13,000?
Yes.
That's kind of a big difference. What are the top 3 or top 5 stats that you've seen that's total bullshit in Webmaster Tools that we got to worry about and not worry about what the numbers are because they're traditionally way off?
Well, okay, so that's a great question. That one, I think, well, look, there's some truth to it. But, you know, as Obi-Wan said, it's truth from a certain point of view, right? So I think that is, it's a little bit, that one's a little bit bullshit. I think the ranking data absolutely is bullshit. Now, depending on who you ask, they'll say, no, that's basically the homogenized, or it's basically average for personalization. What you're seeing there is the total ranking scores that you're getting over a period of time. Now, I've talked to people who said, if you trend Google ranking or Google Webmaster Tools ranking data out long enough, it starts looking legit. On a 30-day, 90-day basis, doesn't look really legit. Right, so you got to capture it. And here's the rub, is that the API is not going to give it all to you. So they're going to say, it's just like Google saying, we've got 10 billion of your pages indexed, but we're only showing you 700. They're not going to give you all the data. But I found the longer, so we're doing that. So we're going to start tracking via the API, how much data can we grab, because the longer, the more Webmaster Tools ranking data that you have, apparently, and this is unsubstantiated, but it comes from a good resource, that it starts looking a little bit more legit. So interesting, but there's just a few things that we pay attention to in Webmaster Tools. I disregard a lot of it, but I like the robots tech stuff, and I really like the view as what's that? The fetch and render tool. That's fantastic. That's one of the best things that they've released in a long time. Anything else? Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.